Thanks for the invitation coming here. I know it's metallic materials. I'm going to focus this presentation on steel, but hopefully you'll get some insights for other materials too. Today, I would like to present, first of all, which are the challenges, which is the situation of steel, which might be applicable to other materials too, in the world, in Europe context, and in the world. Secondly, I'll present to you what is happening in terms of research from the EU perspective, what programs are happening, which opportunities are there for you who are dedicated to this. Most of you will know these opportunities, but others might get some learnings. And in the third instance, how are we looking at the future in terms of addressing those challenges from a research perspective. And we'll talk about a little bit which are the programs that the European Commission or the EU is envisaging to tackle those challenges. The global context, a number of challenges we're facing, or not just challenges, also opportunities, but like climate change, it's in the agenda every day. Technology, all those disruptions coming from artificial intelligence and all the opportunities in things like 3D printing, big data, Industry 4.0, societal challenges too. Jobs, how are this affecting all these challenges, or this context is affecting jobs, the new trends in urbanization, larger and larger cities, migration is an issue that it's quite primary here in Europe too, and we have to talk about these things, all these things, and also market constraints, which as we know, globalization, trade issues, competition, or trade opportunities too. All these things are somehow shaping the EU steel, and in particular, I'll focus on two: sustainability. We or some of our industries are high emitters. The way things are going now probably will not be. We don't want them to happen in the future. So, we'll need to tackle those challenges, and both in the global level, COP21, Paris Agreement, the EU presented last year, at the end of last year, Clean Planet for All, telecommunication. We know we're targeting reductions of greenhouse gas emissions in about 80 to 95% by 2050. Circular economy package. And the other challenge is competitiveness. Competitiveness due to globalization, but not globalization as something that comes from outside. Our companies are becoming global, are looking at other markets and other ways of producing too. And other companies also are looking at producing here and buying companies here. We're buying companies abroad. There's an issue on overcapacity. There's sometimes not even playing field. Countries like China, we have to say, have their strategies in certain industries, and we have to look at those strategies and not being too naive. And things like electricity, energy prices, Europe as non-primary producer of certain type of energy, but also leading the way in other like renewables. As we know now, Europe imports 5% of their needs. So all these things have to be taken into account. We're talking of changing in the future. In terms of sustainability, I'd like just to point out 7% of the total greenhouse gas emissions come from iron steel production. Which is a lot. I mean, in general terms, 24% from industry. Other materials too have a big contribution, but definitely, if we want to focus on the important matters, we have to look at that industry, to look at those high emitters, and iron steel is one of those. Europe is the second world largest producer of steel. Europe, EU as a whole. So it's quite important industry, 300,000 direct jobs, There's 500 production sites, so it's quite widespread. A lot of countries. We see Sweden has their industry. Germany, of course, Spain, UK, France, and many other countries. So it's an industry that's it's all over the place, and it's quite important, quite strategic, and it's also as you say, as I said before, strategic for the European Commission. Uh, as we see here, quite apparently, China is producing more and more in detriment to other producers. Europe has lost many of the other producers too have lost their percentage of production due to the overcapacity of China. So this is again something that is really affecting, and again the employment, which is something that matters, say, the most, but one of the things we want industry because it creates wealth, and wealth that is distributed through jobs most of the time. It's not just we want industry for the sake of it. So we see the decline. Is obviously we've gone through a crisis, but still I think the levels are there to remain. So it's an important industry. It's an industry in a situation that we have to look at, and that's why it's very high in the EU agenda. There's a number of trade defense instruments, not just China. The U.S. with its current president has imposed a certain tariffs, and we have to counteract those trade situations, let's say. Still has a vital importance in key industries like defense, for example. So that's why we can't just let it go. We have to. It's very important, not just because of the jobs produced, because of the strategic importance of the industry itself. We cannot let go that know-how. We cannot let go that industry. It's being addressed by President Juncker, by a number of commissioners. It's high in the EU agenda, which is good. Which is good because that means that whatever we do will be. It's a good time for all of us to try to push on changes on steel. And I come from the research world now, and I would say that research and innovation is at the cornerstone for that change. We change things by sorry, my Swedish is zero, it's, literally, but I think I grasp a little bit of these issues in Mr. Nilsson's presentation. We have an issue of competition, on how competitive we are in Sweden and in Europe, and we can tackle the issue through innovation, being innovative and focusing on the right innovations. I'm not sure if I'm right or not. And those challenges can be turned into solutions. We have to look at the bigger picture. There's a cross-sectorial approach. We said it's not just steel. It's all of the industries might tackle similar issues, say metallic production, metallic materials production. It's energy, but it's also involved in transport, for example. We're talking about like we now need to change where the energy comes from. It comes from renewable sources, but how they produce that much renewable energy, because all transport solutions are claiming they will use the same renewable sources. So it's expansion of it. It's a competition, and we have to look at who are the owners of the sources too, and how are they ready? Who is prepared for that? So that's why it needs to be at European level. Sectors cannot work by themselves. Countries cannot work by themselves. They have to work. They have to do their homework, but they have to share this if we want to be competitive in global. And we have to take leadership too. What is happening currently in terms of steel or materials in funding? We have in R&D, we have mainly the Research Fund for Coal and Steel. So that's where I come from. It's a heritage project, it's a program that comes from the beginning of the European Union, which was the Coal and Steel Fund, and the remaining assets they're used for R&D. They're used for nurturing the industry's R&D projects to sorry, to further create those solutions. Horizon 2020, a very successful framework program that is investing over 100 billion in the last 7 years, or 5 to 7 years. There's a number of projects, mainly in Inspire, CPPP. And for the next round, we have Horizon Europe and Innovation Fund. I'll talk about those a bit later. But this is an R&D stage, but then there will be investment funds for the European Fund strategic investments. There will be structural investment funds, and that was like the deployment phase. So the idea is that these projects get funded along their whole life during the different technological readiness levels in terms of research, but also when in implementation, and try to have focus and follow up those projects and make sure that technologies are followed up and get funded also when they get to the member states, when they get to the actual implementation. And there's also these sectorial initiatives that goes through, for example, set plan that goes through energy, materials, etc. This is a particular program of research fund for coal and steel. It's around 40 million euro each year, funding 50 to 100% of projects, mostly 60%, which is research projects, 50% for pilot demonstrations, maybe might change sooner than later, and also 100% for accompanying measures. It's outside Horizon 20, but it's aligned. And it's looking now, we know it's a heritage program, but now it's adapting to, we're talking to the industry, some people are here today, to adapt it to what are those challenges, which are those needs. And we're looking, for example, for next year's, the pilot demonstration priority will be on energy efficiency. We want to get projects closer to the market. We want to get projects that address climate change. And there's a potential opening. We have around 2 billion euro, those assets. We fund the projects with the interest. There's a potential opening up those assets and funding maybe larger projects. We're looking at those breakthrough projects that will be I won't say carbon-free, that will lead to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and we now have to act now. And we have to spend more money closer to the market. We're talking about hundreds of millions of investments in a short period of time. That's why we are ready to put that money in. Sweden is been participating for pretty much since the beginning of the program, since you joined the EU, I have to say. And it's quite an active participant, around 60 million in contributions, which means that probably the total in projects investments in this time were 120 million, 100 to 120 million projects, which are for research projects, which sometimes are of a small scale. It's a quite significant participation, up to 300 participations, including all the institutions. Most of you are here today in the different projects. Horizon 2020, as I said before, about 10 billion a year, and there are specific partnerships for low carbon and circular industries. Horizon Europe is the next one, and this is now we're preparation on this, and we're looking at where these projects will be. This is in preparation. We have to finish it by this year. We're changing commission at the end of the year. And we're looking at how to address global challenges. A lot of conversations now in the European Parliament sort of side of things in terms of the trialogues, they call it. So in discussions, looking at supporting the creation of diffusion of high quality knowledge. So it's not just the funding. We're talking about knowledge. We're talking about policies, and we're talking about market deployment. All these things we want to fund, and in different strategic areas. And the Innovation Fund, which is related to this challenge of sustainability, essentially that the charges for the CO2 emissions, this is all these costs will be reused to funding projects that challenge or that tackle that issue of emissions, and that it's currently the way it's structuring is maybe the supporting. So different funds put money, say Horizon Europe, Innovation Fund, and the assets for the Research Fund for Coal and Steel, put together funding and create a big funding pot for larger projects. There is a discussion on the partnership on steel research, and that's exactly what I'm saying before. We're talking with the industry. We know that we have to do something. We have to do something soon, and we cannot just go with the smaller projects. We need to go with bigger projects. We need to fund bigger ventures. We know, I would say ventures or adventures sometimes, because it's it's a bit of a high risk profile, as you know, it's getting into the unknown, new technology, who's going to be first, how long it's going to take. We don't know what the new market is. So we're looking at those synergies and sequencing of funds. We're looking at larger scale demonstrators and try to put Europe and try to support the industry, not just with this instrument, but with other instruments. So European steel remains at the foreground. In terms of sustainability, I said before, I'm going to focus on. I will talk about what the challenges are, where we are in terms of funding, present and future. But this funding is related to what we believe. I would say one of the biggest challenges is tackling climate change, and which are the pathways for reduction of CO2 in steel production. And there's a number of those pathways. It's smart carbon usage or carbon direct avoidance. It's either we take this emissions, CO2, CO, and turn it into something different, chemicals or new fuels or so, or we directly avoid carbon emissions in the production. Steel, as you know, is very intensive in coal. Coal and iron, they make the perfect match. You know, coal gives you the energy, gives you the right temperature, the reaction, cheap fuel. So and then you need the carbon for the steel. So what else can you ask for? So what we ask for, changing that actually, and is not having those emissions. You might hear identify or be familiar with some of the projects, initiatives discussing here. Some others might be missing, as I'm hearing, but hybrid, you're familiar with Isarna, using plasma, using direct reduction, using hydrogen, using transition from gas natural to hydrogen. Sweden is paving the way to reduction of CO2 emissions. You have a quite significant project. I know there's others, but I would like to stress out that this has been a project that has raised a lot of interest. The direct reduction, hydrogen reduction. Probably you know more than I how the project's going, but just to let you know that this is the kind of projects that when funding comes around, this is the type of projects, type of initiatives that will enter into will be eligible for funding. Unfortunately, today, this is still a Swedish project, not an EU project. You need more partners, and we'll have to find a way to get hybrid back to an EU perspective. Because, as I said before, we need to act as we need to use the economies of scale for this large transition. Otherwise, it won't work. So there's others too. It's not just like a hybrid, and we have to look at all these pathways. And now we're looking at a way of analyzing those projects, of analyzing which are the future technologies. Again, I will look at these and we'll set up the next step, or which are the conditions for funding these next steps. So we any contribution in this, and please don't be shy. Talk to us. We'll try to help. We know there's IP involved, but in the commission that's safe. So if there's initiatives you want to talk to other partners, or you want to find synergies, we are there to help. And actually, that's what we want to hear. The evolution of steel research, in line with what we said before, new applications. Will be new applications. Well, we know them now, or we don't know. There will be new markets, clean steel, for example. steel that's not produced by, or is produced in a certain way. Some years ago, probably we were talking about clean energy, and so it was the same energy, but people chose, or we have chose to these producers of clean energy instead of other producers. We did all in our households, and we did in companies, and so there's a change. There's incentives. There's changes. So clean steel might be a new market too. We need to break silos between steel and other materials. It's a lot of learnings. It's a lot of common sort of trends. So we need to utilize whatever's done in one, say, one material, one market, one type of sector with other. Obviously, the trends like big data, automatization, that will bring major changes to the way we produce. Cybersecurity will be a new challenge too. Material supply will have this challenge as well, on how who's leading the way in producing and supplying, who are those raw materials producers, that in which situation they are. And even new distribution channels. I'm gonna be here a bit more provocative if you want, but an Amazon of steel, you know, I say like markets. Well, do we know how we're gonna be distributing soon? How we're gonna be selling or producing in smaller scale, in smaller places, or we're gonna just go produce somewhere else? And maybe there's different intermediation for the sales, which we cannot imagine now, but the way everything's evolving so quickly, maybe there will be changes in that distribution too. And don't miss the global dimension of everything. Is unstoppable. Companies, we don't know where companies are from anymore. We cannot talk about local anymore. Everything is completely embedded in value chains that are all over the place. So all these things matter. We have to look at all these things. We have to look at the competition. We have to look at the challenge. And when we're looking at, I'm aware that research sometimes have to look at the very detail and the nitty-gritty of things, but we cannot lose the big picture. If there's a number of reports from just to finalize from the European Commission, where you can find or you can get some of those. We try to get to the industry, to the countries, to try to get those inputs as much as we can, get together and put together some materials for you to have a look when you look at the challenges. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So please go to the website and look for those industries. And again, if you want to go for funding, I'll put my contacts later there. But I want to look for funding opportunities or what's going on, funding partners. You can always go to the EU website as another resource. I know you guys have excellent websites and resources, as I've seen. But it's another, if anything that helps, I hope bringing something to you. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we do have a microphone prepared. So are there any questions for Alejandro now when we have him here? Anyone? I do have a question, and it's related to the theme of this conference. And actually, you had on one slide that supporting the creation and diffusion of high-quality knowledge. What was that? That sounds very aligned with the theme of this conference. What should we know about that?
It's what we're trying in the EU is not just focusing research on the mere application of it. It's how we manage the knowledge. There's European Research Agency in terms of getting that knowledge and understanding which is the parts that make us different in a sense. So it's trying to keep not just the IP, is trying to keep which are the the research that lead to good ways. And there's a lot of work around that, and that's what Horizon Europe wants to focus in too. It's not just the mere application. It's not just going to research. It's also which is the knowledge, which is that base that makes us different to be competitive eventually. But this is understanding not just the you know the application, but also what is the knowledge and which is the learnings that we can get to those applications.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you.